Right. Alrighty then.
Well, hello there, everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to what is quite a gloomy Headlingley day. Pathetic fallacy and all that. It's not going very well in the Ashes at the moment. Also, Max Verstappen is no longer the world champion. I thought I'd get that in there. But there is, as ever, a ray of sunshine in my day, and I think in all of our days, and that comes in the form of Charlie O'Brien. Hello, Charlie.
Hello, that's very kind of you. I think unlike the Max Verstappen loss where he can be incredibly proud of his efforts and he knows he left everything out there, I don't think the same can be said of this England team after that second game.
No, I don't think it can. And I suppose we better hop straight into it, Charlie. And I think it'd be good to just get your general thoughts. Where are you at mentally right now? I can't imagine you're in a great place.
No, for context, it's Tuesday now, so I've had a few days to dwell
marinate.
On it. Yeah, but not good. I didn't bother to watch the last day. I was busy.
We knew what was coming.
Yes, exactly. And the day before was one of the worst cricket watching days I've had in ages. I woke up, I skipped the first session because I knew I'd been working late and I knew that England weren't going to be able to bowl out the tail. And I woke up at 6:40 after 2 glasses of wine and 2 hours sleep with a splitting headache. Checked the score and yeah, Australia was still batting. And then watched 4 or 5 hours of just textbook England capitulation in Australia. I think the headline for me on this one is that I was pretty reticent to blame Bazball for the last test. I just thought it was poor shot selection. But this one, yeah, I think you can firmly place the blame at the foot of Bazball this time. I think that was a pretty blameless pitch. I think they threw away wickets and I think they bowled terribly.
Should we rewind to the first day where a certain thing happened that we've been waiting
like a
for?
million years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been completely squashed to the bottom of the pile of things to talk about, to complain about. But actually, I think early on that day, would it be fair to say that it actually didn't feel like a fantastic start, and something which ended up happening kind of needed to happen to get England any footing in this test?
Yeah, third innings in a row, they lost a wicket in the first over to Mitchell Starc. It was Ben Duckett. Got a good one, to be fair. Maybe Duckett's worst test since his recall with a 15 and a duck and 2 drops, but in fairness, I think he did get a couple of good balls. And then Pope seemed to have just not learned any of the lessons of Perth, chopping on, trying to drive. And it needed a certain Joe Root to show his class.
Yeah,
and it was his
he
class.
kind of did, didn't he?
He did, and it was it's the kind of 100 that he scored so many times where it's in a par to below par score that the wheels would have just completely come off in his absence. And he just, played his own game. He didn't let the outside noise affect him. He didn't feel like he had to put his foot down like it seemed like he did in the first test. He sort of batted well in Crawley's slipstream, who had a decent test with the bat in fairness and responded well to his pair in the first test. But yeah, Root, I think he just read the situation really well. He knew when to put the foot down a bit. Him and Stokes understood the crucial moment under lights and they really dug in. And then towards the end of the day, he sort of
thrashed it about a bit.
He got the long levers out, batting with Jofra to get England up to what ended up being a below par total, but I think, it would have been much worse without him.
Absolutely. I think we need to sit and stew in Joe Root a little bit, because we are going to have to move on to some quite sobering conversational paths and alleyways. And this is big for Joe Root's legacy. I mean, well, it's bigger to some people, bigger to others. I suppose you could ask the question, did he need to do this? Certainly the Aussies will say that he did. Do you think this now shuts them up? This is it. Joe Root is an all-time great.
Yeah, and it's a shame the context it's come in, but that was, it was a pretty flimsy argument that people were using against him. So, and when Darren Lehman, he was one of the people pushing it, was the Australian ex-head coach, said that he was a rung below Smith, Williamson, Coley because he didn't have a century in Australia.
Well, he can't be. He's stepped up into that tier now.
But I think, for me, just the ridiculousness of the argument was highlighted by the fact that it was his 40th Test 100. I don't think anyone with 40 hundreds. I think to the idea that this one of his 40 tons is the difference maker about whether he's a great player or not is a little bit farcical.
It is. And you mentioned the backdrop. The fact that it came in a pretty comfortable defeat in the Test. Do you think that does affect how it was viewed, or is it just he's done it now? That's all that matters.
Well, the thing about Test match hundreds is the state of the game is important, and match winning hundreds are the best hundreds, and Joe Root has plenty of them. But ultimately, I think to be the only player to sort of stand up and be counted in a defeat is also very honourable, and it wasn't. It wasn't like a super spicy pitch, and obviously, to be fair, there was no Cummins, no Hazelwood, and they both cause real issues for Joe Root. So when they return, or when Cummins returns, at least we'll see if he can stand up. Yeah. But I do think it came in a defeat, but I don't think you can blame Root for the defeat at all. So in that way, I don't think it affects the validity of the 100.
Yeah, good. That's what I want to hear. So.
Quickly though, he has never won a Test match in Australia, Joe Root.
Oh, is that the next? They're not going to say that, are they? Well, he's got his tan, but he's got. I don't know why I'm doing a London accent. It'll be an Aussie. I'm not going to try that. Yeah, well, mate, he needs to get a. I'll stop. But no, that can't be an argument. Surely not. So obviously, this was in Brisbane. This was a day-nighter. This was a pink ball Test, which obviously throws into the melting pot a bit of tactical analysis that we have to do based on decisions that are made. Where do you declarations, where do you bat, where do you bowl, and we've got written down here on our lovely document which Charlie provides for me because I don't know what I'm doing, declaration or no declaration. There was a chat about whether England should declare and have a bowl at the Aussies in the twilight, in the dark, when it's tough to see, when conditions are difficult. Didn't do that, instead just went out swinging. It felt a little bit like, well, we could put a few runs on the board, or we might get out and have a bowl at them. Do you think it was just sort of hedging your bets?
Yeah, I think looking back, it's not particularly I think England were under par, and if they'd have declared, they would have been even more under par. And had Australia negotiated the tricky twilight, which they can do, they've got more experience of doing it than anyone else. England would have been made to look very foolish. And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about it it's because I think it's interesting. It was just a very interesting parallel to the first Test in 2023 when England did declare with Joe Root 100 not out, with a bowler on the other end seeing it nicely. It was Ollie Robinson that time. And Stokes in early 2023 was ultimate Bazball hubris, where they just felt untouchable. And Stokes pulled the troops out with 5 overs to go in the day, just a normal Test, it wasn't a day-nighter, just to have a crack at the Aussies. And then we lost by about 2 wickets in the end. Right. So that, I think that was one of the moments where Bazball was really sort of under the spotlight. So I almost felt like, is this an overcorrection from Stokes? Is he not declaring because he's got demons? Yeah. But to be fair, he's not that kind of character. But I think, as fun as that last hour was for England, you did get the sense that Australia were pretty happy just not to be batting. And they didn't even look like they were trying to take the wicket. Yeah. And also, it's something that we'll come on to more over the course of the episode as we move through the Test, but they are just the masters of this format, and I think they are very good at reading the match situations, and they just knew that to have England batting with their number 11 at that point was, potentially favourable to Travis Head being stuck in.
So if you were Skippy, would you have done anything differently?
I would have asked my guys to score about 100 more runs.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's very fair. So should we move on to day 2?
We shall.
Let's move on to day 2, which, all my memory of day 2, all that I think about is the dropping of many balls on the floor. I'm sure there's more to it than that, Charlie, but should we start there?
Well, it started with a drop. England had started well. Jofra was bowling with control. Atkinson looking decent from the other end. And it started with a drop. Travis Head was 2 off 20 odd and looking a little bit skittish. And he edged one and it was dropped by Jamie Smith. And it was not something that should ever be dropped. It was real memories of Joss Butler in the last Ashes Down Under. Just a player. There's a lot of similarities between Butler and Smith, actually. For a wicketkeeper, they're sort of they're very within themselves as characters. They're not sort of big characters, and they're handy with the gloves without being sort of spectacular. Sort of more renowned for their attacking batting, but also the kind of character where you can, by the end of that Ashes tour, you could really see Butler struggling with Test cricket, and he's never played since. And it was it was not long pre-Bazball, that last Ashes series, so it's sort of one of the great what ifs of Bazball, really, because Butler would have been the ideal keeper for Bazball. And there was even talk about getting him in as like a pinch hitting opener, which is just sort of like an opener where you just try and attack. But yeah, I think that the last series just really finished Butler as a Test player. You could just see it in his eyes by the end. He didn't have it in him anymore. But Jamie Smith is really at the start of his career, so he and England can't afford for this series to sort of end up being that for him. But yeah, it was not something that should have been dropped. And then you just saw a change in Travis Head there, where he was like, I can't hang about here. You know, our favourite saying, there's one with my name on it, so let's just go. And although he only ended up scoring about 30 odd, it was just a real tempo change in the innings, and then Bryden Cast came on and just could not find any control, and the wheels quickly came off for England. I think, the drops in the evening session were sort of the final nail in the coffin at a point where it looked like Cast, despite having a pretty woeful day, had got England back into it, but the story was of just a pretty much full day of pretty atrocious bowling, or at least that morning session was some of the worst I remember seeing. Just absolutely no control.
You got my cogs whirring there, Charlie. They were very slowly, but just the idea of the psychology behind the drop. And I guess, from a basic surface level, you think about a dropped catch means you haven't taken a wicket, which means that you are further away from sort of progressing in the match in a very linear fashion. But also the way that, as you mentioned, Head changed his approach, changed his mentality, by the sounds of it, for the better. So in a way, a dropped catch is kind of twofold. It's a double-edged sword in that you not only you don't take the wicket, but also you give a wake-up call to the opponent. Yeah, and the commentators always love to say, like, often in white ball cricket, you'll see a player going for a big shot and then he's dropped on the boundary, and then because of the nature of the back end of a white ball innings, he goes for the shot again, gets 6 this time, and the commentator will go, how often do you see that? But yeah, it is. I think often the easiest way to measure a drop is by how many runs you sort of add. And Brad Haddon, the ex-Australian wicketkeeper, was sort of saying on the TV that, I was always one to just count every run. But if I drop someone on 20 and then they got 70, I'm going, well, I cost my team 50 runs there. But it is more than that. I think it's, it is a real momentum change, and I think it can really affect the mindset of the fielding team, and it can affect the mindset of the batters as well. Yeah. This second day, do you think that this was the key point in the test? Yeah, I think as much as the third one was the one where you could just say that was awful from start to finish and we walking away with no chance, I think it didn't feel good at the end of day 2 to have a slender lead, but for them to still be 5 down when they probably should have been 7 down. And I think going into that morning session, it just felt like a real missed opportunity to sort of like, I think what Australia did, which England weren't able to do because they were bowled out, or very close to being bowled out at the end of the first day, is they sort of shifted the game in their favour. Because if you think that the day-night test work, where it's you have a day
specifically the Brisbane one, because the timing's a little different. You have a morning session, which if the ball's new, like you're going to have success because it's a new ball sort of pitch, or it's the pink ball is a new ball dominant ball. So you're going to have a little bit of luck there for the first hour maybe, and then it's for the batters really. And then the second session, about halfway through the sun starts to set, so it sort of shifts back in the bowler's favour. And then the last session is sort of all dark, and that can be very bowler friendly. So what Australia were able to do that England weren't is to sort of shift the dynamics of the game. By batting into that fourth session, you can then just dictate terms in the match, because they were able to go into that morning session with an old ball, with wickets in hand, and to say, we just need to stretch this out so that England are batting under lights with the new ball. And then that's just a complete sort of momentum shift. And to be fair, credit to Australia's lower order, they recognised this. They didn't go swinging like Atkinson and Cast. They realised it was more important to bat time than anything else. And Stark really just sort of ground England into the dirt. Usually when you'd, in a conventional test, if you saw that happening, you would say, they're doing that to get overs in the bowler's legs. And that helps as well. But in this case, you could clearly tell that it was just them saying, Mitch Stark himself saying, I want that pink ball under lights and I'm going to get it for myself by just batting, and he batted brilliantly.
It seems like the Aussie game management is just, leaps and bounds ahead of ours. I suppose the Bazball thing is, it's a mentality, it's a mindset, but the Aussies just seem to know how to handle the occasion.
Yeah, and I think that's what McCullum and Stokes are. You can tell in the run up, in the aftermath of this game, Stokes particularly he's really angry with his players. You don't see that often. He's all about keeping the morale high, and even when he has been angry on the field, he sort of apologised in the dressing room and publicly, saying, I lost it there and I'm sorry. This time he's come out swinging. He said, there's no place for weak men in my dressing room. There's no weak men in the Australian dressing room. And what McCullum has been trying to stress more and more in the last year, ever since the India series, really is you need to understand the match situation. You need to recognise when to go and when not to. And I think with McCullum and Stokes, it's a little bit of the Thierry Henry, like being a bad football manager, because he just doesn't understand why people can't do what he does.
Yeah, it's almost like if I was on that pitch, I'd be doing so much better.
I do think that McCullum and Stokes are good man managers, but also at the same time they're two of the greatest cricketers of all time in game awareness and understanding. McCullum was a hyper-attacking player and an early one. He really pushed the game on in white ball and red ball cricket, but he was so good at it. It was his natural game. And Stokes actually has really never been that player. Really, he's always been someone who digs in, understands the situation, and then he goes. His Headlingley 100, he was 3 off 50 balls. He was 50 off 150 balls as he was in this test match. And I think we should get onto the Jonathan Agnew thing about the Bazball dying, because I think you raised a good point that Agnew said about Stokes, how Stokes' batting can be seen as sort of a template for how he wants his team to bat. Yeah. So if you want to mention that, and I've got a riposte.
Yes, well, in that BBC article, Agnew, was it, did you say? Jonathan Agnew, who said that when Bazball was sort of in its infancy, Ben Stokes showed the way by going out there and just slapping it about. And the sort of the opposite parallel here is that he went out there and really slowed the game down, as you mentioned, and just sort of I guess game management, you would say, went into game management mode, and that could signal, as we've been sort of discussing briefly, possibly the death of Bazball, certainly a change in Bazball is what he was saying. Your riposte?
Yeah, I think I would dispute it a little bit. I do understand what he means, but I think, the Stokes, it was very clear in that first Bazball summer that Stokes was almost sacrificing himself as a batter in order to remove the fear of getting out from his teammates. Not to say, you should be happy with a scratchy 20, but just to say, don't be scared to get out. I don't care how you get out. I care that you score runs. And Stokes actually had a very poor summer with the bat on the whole. And the only 100 he did score was when him and Folkes, who was kind of the most defensive batter in the team, played within themselves and got England out of trouble after they'd just lost the first test. So I think you have seen Stokes always willing to sort of adapt if he feels like England needed it. I think that first summer was very much just about liberating his players, and it did liberate Jonny Bairstow and the like. But even Jonny Bairstow in that summer there was times when he, sort of recognised the need to dig in, and then he would counter-attack. So, but ever since the 23 Ashes the next year, I would say that Stokes' role in the team actually has been to be the firefighter, because I think he recognised that with 5 people going hell for leather in front of him, and then Ben Folkes behind him at 7 was removed from the team in favour of Jonny Bairstow for that 23 Ashes. And I think he realised in that 23 Ashes, when there was a few sort of top order collapses for England, actually I'm the only guy here who can sort of dig in and get us out of trouble. And ever since he has seen that as his role, he hasn't sort of gone swinging from ball one. He's sort of tried to soak up pressure. And I think this innings was just another example of that.
So he's been doing it for a while then? Yeah,
I don't think this was him saying, you just have to bat like this from now on, like sod attacking if you're gonna lose wickets, you just need to play like this. Because I think the whole point of Bazball was to liberate limited players, and I think it did liberate Pope and Crawley to an extent. I think the problem being is that fast forward 4 or 5 years now, Pope and Crawley are still in the team, and liberated or not, they have not been able to raise their averages to where they need to be, and unfortunately their limitations as players, Bazball has just been unsuccessful in mitigating them. And what we've ended up in with 2 players there who still have most if not all of the technical and mentality flaws that they had at the start, paired with no sort of development in game awareness, in understanding the situation, and then pair that with Harry Brook and Ben Duckett, the sort of Bazball children who came in the series in Pakistan when England could go at 6 and over. And I think as a result, have never really got out of the mindset that they can go at 6 and over, and the mindset that they don't actually need to go at 6 and over. So I think you've got 4 players there, 2 of which are technically and mentally limited, and 2 of which who are incredibly talented but maybe lack a game awareness that for the level of player they should be developing it by now. And maybe there's an understanding that Bazball is getting in the way of someone like Harry Brook actually learning how to play the situation.
It's listening to you talk like that kind of reminded me of, as a Manchester United fan, I don't know if I've revealed that on this podcast yet, is that a common question that is asked of us at the moment is system or players, which is the problem. And I suppose if I could throw that question to you, Charlie, is that do you think that this Bazball system needs to either be done away with? Does it need some heavy tweaks? Or is it we just haven't got the players?
Well, that's the thing. I think it started because we didn't have the players.
Yeah.
And then very quickly we did have some of the players because Brook and Duckett emerged. And I think their natural game is to attack. So I think asking them not to would be just as counterproductive and counterintuitive as everything else. But I think England need to understand that it's not a one-shoe-fits-all policy. And I think there had been a greater understanding of that ever since the India series last year. McCullum has very much said, I think McCullum and Stokes have tried to tweak for the last year. And maybe now they're both sort of at their wits' end. And just saying, actually, maybe we just need a complete reset here because, if you're not going to take our subtle hints maybe we need to do more. And we don't want to throw it forward too far. But I do think we're in an interesting position here where it's usually the coach and captain that will go after an Ashes series. Whereas I actually think Stokes and McCullum, as much as they take a lot of flack, I think there's three people who I think will be facing the music this time around, and it's Zach Crawley, Ollie Pope and Rob Key, the managing director. I think we're far more likely to see those three go than we are to see Stokes and McCullum. I think Stokes and McCullum are locked in till 2027. They have a lot of credit in the bank, and I think they will be trusted to make the changes necessary to improve England. But I think currently, Ollie Pope could go before the end of the series, to be honest.
Interesting. Well, we did touch on that, didn't we, briefly, I think, in our preview pod. Was there a chance of that happening? So Bethel, would it be Bethel who comes in?
It would be Bethel. He's in no form
right.
In the Lions games. He got 71 in the one just concluded, which England Lions lost. It's a lovely constant of a miserable Ashes tour is that the A team also just lose all their games in the background as well. So this would be the point when you may be thinking, are we going to see changes for England? But they've also been struggling. But I do think that long term Bethel will come in for Pope, and I also think that my theory is that Jamie Smith will take the opening berth from Zach Crawley in the next summer, and that Jordan Cox will come in to keep.
Interesting. Well, yeah, we had that. Was it in Skyrack? We had that discussion about the wicket keeping situation and just whether you go for someone who is, as England seem to have done, fits the philosophy from the batting point of view. And it's he's a decent wicket keeper, but not a natural wicket keeper, as you put it. Doesn't play wicket keeper for his
for Surrey, no.
for his county. So that feels a bit odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, but in fairness, it's not an England only thing. Like the role of the wicket keeper, the role of the
wicket weeper
has changed a lot over the years, and I think most teams would rather have a good batter in there. I think Australia are in the fortunate position at the minute where their best batter is also their best wicket keeper. Alex Carey kept like a dream this test, and he also batted well. He's just a very, very tidy player. I think Jamie Smith seemed like a good option at the time because he was like he's not a bad keeper at all, and he's also like a proper batter while also being able to put his foot down. He's not like a dasher. He's not just a white ball player. And Ben Foakes, who he replaced, was the best wicketkeeper. Is the best wicketkeeper in the country. I don't have a problem with that. I think for an Ashes series down under especially, I think England recognise that there are some tours where the quality of the keeping comes more into it, and it actually sort of buys you dismissals, so it almost buys you runs. And they actually put Ben Foakes back in for the India series because there was a space in the middle order to keep, because they recognise his keeping would, get them stumpings in. I think when you're in India and it's ragging square and you've got your keepers up to the stumps, you need a good keeper. In fairness, I think in Australia, it's one of the easiest places to keep in the world because the bounce is so true. You're taking so many balls above your head and there's not too much deviation. And, it's actually, you've seen Alex Carey up to the stumps a lot in this game, but it's not actually a common theme in Australia. So I think in the context of this series, it's completely fair enough.
Yeah.
We've even seen in New Zealand them throw the gloves to Ollie Pope to sort of fix an issue, and he did very well. He did fine. So I don't have a problem with that, but it was a really bad drop.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also discussed briefly in the pub Pillowgate, as they're calling it.
Yes.
Jofra Archer. I think it's important to note the context. I mean, if you're, very much into cricket, then you will absolutely know how much the Ashes matters and how everything is so intensely scrutinised, and that you need to show that you're locked in. The media wants to see it to be cricket. How do we beat Australia? That's the only thing we're thinking about. That's all that matters. So when you see players playing golf in between, there's a little bit of, question marks around that. And if you were to see a player walking in, who already has, as you mentioned to me, a little bit of a would you call it how would you describe it? A stereotyping? What would you call it? He's seen as lazy, but we had this discussion where you were saying that that isn't necessarily the case. That's just a media thing or is a bias thing.
Yeah, I think Jofra has always had to combat ideas that he's lazy, and I think it's sort of threefold. I think his effortlessness plays into it. He doesn't bustle in, he just glides in. And he's got a perfect action, so he doesn't need to glide in. As much as I'm not sure why we need to see the same biomechanics thing for the same three bowlers in the TNT/Fox coverage. Yeah. Every time they run in, I've seen Jofra's wrist snap about 100 times now. But it does at least tell us that, you know, the interesting thing about Jofra's is that he runs in a lot slower than the other quick bowlers, but his arm speed is so fast that he still generates the pace. And it's also his arm speed that sort of injured him so much because his elbow just like can't actually deal with how fast he flings it round. So I think that has led to him maybe seeming lazy. And then I think, you know, that action making him injured and how much time he's been out of the game has also led to perceptions that he's lazy and that, you know, we don't see him for ages. And when we do see him, he's posting on Instagram, chilling by the pool, or he's at carnival, or he's doing whatever. And people think because he's enjoying his life and he's not showing his rehab, which he's clearly been doing very hard, he's in the best shape of his life. And the fact that he's even stayed committed to Test cricket and not just gone and taken the IPL money shows that his heart's in the right place. Yeah. So I think that also, you know, disputes a lazy thing. But I think unfortunately there is, in my opinion, just a bit of a racial bias there as well. I do think that, you know, we wouldn't be calling other people lazy like we call him lazy, and I think his laid back demeanour and everything else sort of leads him to be unfortunately stereotyped, and I don't think it's a fair stereotype. That being said, you said the optics of it don't look good. Yeah, so
he came to the stadium holding a pillow under his arm
while England was still bowling.
Yeah. And I suppose the idea behind that was just that he wanted to, you know, get some kip and have a rest when he wasn't bowling, I suppose. But I just think pop it in a bag.
Yeah, I think some media manager should have been there to just be like, Joff, mate.
Yeah, suitcase, it doesn't look good.
Suitcase, or even just if someone else was holding it, if a backroom staff was holding it, no one would have thought anything. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just one of them where you just need to have a little bit more awareness in that situation. And it was also just like, it was almost like you knew from that moment on that England were destined to be in the field for another 4 hours and then get rolled, and he was actually going to get no rest at all. I think, you know, he wasn't far away from being batting that night, and, you know, we would have known what the media would have said about that if he had to chuck the pillow away and come out, strap his pads on.
There will have been some puns, I think, in the morning papers. Yes. I think it's fair to say.
Do you would you say that us showing up to recording a podcast with pillows is a suggestion that we're not taking this seriously?
Well, I think that we're in Headlingley. We don't have to be doing this. I think our hearts and our heads are clearly in the right place. I think if we had a media manager, maybe they'd say, try and disguise the pillow, maybe have a tailored pillow that is the shape of our backs so that you can't see it popping out. I've worn quite a large jacket that I think will maybe hide my pillow slightly. And if I just go for a big sit, then I think I'll be okay. But maybe someone should have whispered us, you know, to us, just say, it doesn't look good, lads, you know.
Yeah, and the
optics.
You guys at home don't get to see Johnny's vocal warm-up. This guy trains like no man's.
Dedicated.
He's 6 hours a day. That's also another interesting thing I didn't write down there, is that McCullum's actually said that England trained too hard in the build-up to this test. They put an extra 2 or 3 days on after the scrutiny of not playing that ping ball warm-up.
Yeah.
And he actually just said, well, I think we just wore ourselves out in the Brisbane heat and we sort of crumbled to the pressure and we actually shouldn't have trained all those days.
Interesting. Do you agree with that?
No.
No.
I think...
It seems a little bit like an excuse.
Yeah, I think the ping ball game, in fairness, I think there's been a bit of a correction there where people have said, actually, a couple of Australians in the media came out and said, you don't want to be playing that Canberra game. It's 15 degrees colder in Canberra. The conditions are completely different. It actually wouldn't have helped you at all. And all it would have done is, send a message that they were crumbling under the pressure and that they were, just doing what the media were telling them. That being said, I think you can call into question England's approach of just practicing on their own, and they probably should try harder to set up intra-team matches and to get a little bit more time out in the middle rather than just in the nets, because it is different, I think. So I don't think they trained too hard, no, but I think maybe they just didn't direct their training in the right way, maybe. So we've gone through the days there and sort of had a bit of an overview of what actually happened, but the bottom line is we lost comfortably, and 2-0 down. It feels like there's just not much hope of even tying this Ashes. So we had this discussion as well that the mindset and the goal might now just be try and win a test. Yeah, and I've been a little bit surprised with the reaction, some of the reaction to this. Obviously, two very prominent columnists in Jonathan Agnew and Andrew Miller have said Bazball's dead. I think I understand what they mean with, it seems like, we've seen Stokes and McCullum speak in a way they've never spoken before. So I can understand that. But the day before, I think it was Stefan Shelmett, the BBC correspondent, said that England were now battling to avoid their worst Ashes defeat down under in a generation. And I thought, hang on. There's been a few. Yeah, so since we won the last series in 2011, we have lost 5-0, 4-0, 4-0. So I'm not actually sure what the criteria is to be the worst, because they've all been pretty horrendous, and it's not been like, I remember the last series in particular, there was not really a game there where England were particularly close to winning at any point. There was one partnership between Milan and Root where we was like, oh, okay, we may be in this. And then they both fell in the 80s and we fell in a heap. The last test, we bowled Australia out fairly cheaply, but then we got bowled out even more cheaply. So I don't really understand how we've suddenly, I think it's a little bit of recency bias where it's like, well, this is the worst one because it's happening right now. And also it's maybe the worst one because the hope was there this time in a way it wasn't. That was the point I was going to possibly raise, is that maybe it's because there was genuine, even expectation that this was the England side that could at least challenge and at least run them close, and that this was set to be a real contest. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't really been, even though, to be fair, that first test, there was a moment when it was all looking a bit comfortable. So I don't know. I think the worst is like on a sort of fundamental level. That seems like a ridiculous statement, but maybe because it was supposed to be so much more. It's the hope that kills you. Yeah, but with how quickly we're all in the gutter, I don't think you can underestimate how big a win would be. I honestly think that it would really change how people evaluated this series and go, actually, we've not done that for ages. So I honestly think, as much as, it's a loser's mindset and I don't think there's any chance of retaining the Ashes now, I do think winning the next test, we'd all of a sudden be a bit like, oh, okay. Yeah. But it does feel like these two tests were just a huge missed opportunity. With Lyon dropped this one. He said he was filthy. I don't know if you saw that. I saw that, yeah. He snuck into the press and delivered a damning interview. Yeah. But he'll be back for the next test. And Pat Cummins officially will be back. Mark Wood officially out for the series. So I think this is the first test where you can say that the injury news is looking better for Australia. So it does just really feel like this was the time. Yeah. So it's a missed opportunity. Yeah, massively. And I do think that, I think that it's been a one-man show. And I think that Boland's been decent. Doggett's been fine, not great. I think Nisa was okay. He got Pfeiffer in the end, and for them to have no spinner to call, I think Cam Green's been pretty anonymous as the all-rounder. So for Mitch Starc to do it on his own is really frustrating. And, it's frustrating in the first test, even when he was bowling well. But I think especially frustrating in that second innings of the second test, just gone, when he did look a little bit spent, and England finally safely negotiated a opening spell from him. And then for Crawley and Pope to just gift their wickets, caught and bowled, to Nisa when Boland, Nisa, Doggett came on, I think to allow them to sort of wrestle momentum back, and then meant that when the prime conditions started, they could bring back a fresh Starc and a fresh Boland, and they just wreaked havoc.
And then with, Cummins coming back in for the next one, that's, potentially more rest for Starc, but also you're not throwing a weak bowler in there.
You won't get that rest back. England won't get those opportunities to consolidate against weaker bowlers. There will be someone who's always at you. They're very good at rotating the bowlers in short, sharp spells, and so there's just always, at least from one end, an elite bowler. And also to get Lyon back in means Lyon will just hold up an end. He'll, in Adelaide, which is more likely to be flat and then spin friendly as the game goes on, Lyon will just hold up an end, and it means from the other end, from one end you'll have a world-class spinner who's giving you nothing, from the other end you'll just have a threatening quick constantly.
It seems like whenever we preview the next test on, it gets more and more gloomy, and I suppose that will be affected by the fact that we keep losing to the first two. What can England do? I've asked this question before. What changes need to be made? What hope is there for Adelaide?
I think England should refresh the bowling. I think there's not a massive amount of overs in their legs, to be fair, because they've been getting the job done of losing pretty quickly. But I do think that Bryden Carse just looked out of sorts in that test. I think you can't fault his commitment, but England need more control. I think if you're looking who's on the bench who's going to most likely to offer that control, it's probably Matt Potts. I think that Josh Tongue would also be a handful for the Australians. I think he was a miss not playing him in this test, to be honest, because he's got a really slippery action. He's one of those players, he's almost like a cricketing Yannick Bolasie, where he doesn't actually know. A
cricketing Yannick Bolasie, that's fantastic.
Like, he doesn't know what's going to happen, so how the hell are you going to know what's going to happen?
And he's flapping about the place.
Yeah, like he just sprays it everywhere, but he's got he's got an angle where he's really in at you. He can swing it both ways. He challenges good players. I think he challenges Steve Smith, and he swings it well as well. So I would like to see Josh Tongue in there. I think he should have been in this game, because I think he would have been a nightmare under lights to face, and I think he was the perfect Mark Wood replacement in that game as someone who is pardon me, someone who is quick, slippery, a little bit unpredictable. So I think he should come in. Whether Potts and Tongue is like a little bit too weakened, maybe, but I would be inching towards Potts in for Archer or Atkinson, depending on who pulls up better, and Tongue in for Carse. And then the other interesting one is the spinner, Australian Ryan Campbell, who's the Durham coach, has said this morning that England need to play Bashir. He said it's not a place for part-time spinners because it's flat and then it will break up and actually spin. You need a proper spinner. I think whether Bashir is a proper spinner at this moment in time, his return figures of 0 for 115 in the Lions game just finished. So I think England probably will stick with Jacks, but I think they need to back him more if they do. Ryan Campbell was suggesting that you have Jacks sort of in there as you batter because he looked good. Like you have him in the middle order for a Pope and switch it around, and then you have a spinner in there as well. I don't think England will do that, and I also think that Tongue and Potts being in there significantly weakens the tail in comparison to Carse and Atkinson. So I think probably what I would like to see England do is keep Jacks at 8, but back him to bowl because he bowled all right, and actually just give him the chance to impact the game with his bowling. And then I would have Tongue and Potts in there.
Something's just occurred to me, Charlie, is that I don't think we've touched on the wonder catch, have we?
No, it's kind of much
Doesn't
like
really matter.
Roots Century, it feels obscured. And even in the context of that session, it was like we dropped, even in that over, they dropped when they should have taken. Yeah. But it was a blinder from Will Jacks. He had a tidy game. And I think he showed exactly why England have fast-tracked him back into the team ahead of others. He looked really composed with the bat. I think he played a loose shot in the first innings, but who didn't? He looked tidy enough with the ball once he was given the opportunity. And yeah, it was a screamer of a catch. It was behind him, as Nasser Hussain said about Ben Stokes in 2015. And yeah, I love it when they just run off ball in hand, pointing up, like with that look on their face, like, yeah, I'm the fucking man.
Yeah. And the thing is though, if some of those missed opportunities, those dropped catches were taken, then suddenly that catch could have been a really important, pivotal, match-defining moment.
That over, 2 wickets in the over with Green yorked, and then that and a drop in between really felt like a potential turning point. And I think there were 2 more drops in that session. Duckett dropped one, and then Root dropped one that, as we were discussing off camera earlier, that it should have been Smith's catch. I think had those 2 been taken, Australia are 7 down. You probably get an 8th then at that point. And then, 8 down overnight. I think if England had then managed to skittle Australia for another 40 runs in the morning, that's being generous. They were really in that game, and they would have had an opportunity to bat in the daylight.
So I always try and think, dropped catches, are they just it just happens? Is it a mental thing? Is it a conditions thing? Is it a pressure thing? Because I don't feel like Australia would, drop those.
No. I think England have never been the best catching side. I think they've improved a little bit over the years, but you still get the sense that when things start to go wrong, they can fall apart a little bit.
When it rains, it pours.
And I think Australia, to be fair, you've seen Australia when under pressure, when the once or twice they've been under pressure in the field. This series, misfields creep in and overthrows, but when the moment comes to take the catch, they don't drop the catch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that it's just they say that the longer you're in the field, the more sort of haggard you become, and it just becomes harder to take those catches because you get tired. Even though fielding in cricket is quite a lot of standing around, it also is a fair bit of running as well.
Yeah,
even just in between overs.
I think they say it a lot in football, and they used to say it a lot about David De Gea and where he was really strong, is that you as a goalkeeper, you could go the whole match without facing a shot. But if you face one shot on target and you make a mistake, you've got to be dialed in, you've got to be focused. And when you're called into action, if you're a fielder that hasn't really, had to move about that much, hasn't had to deal with too much, but then that opportunity comes, you've got to be sharp, haven't you?
Absolutely. And I think keeping the energy up in the field is important, and it's something Stokes is very good at. But on the TV coverage, they were sort of saying it really feels like England's heads have dropped here in a way that it doesn't usually happen. And that can mean that, if you're not talking with your teammates, if you're not having a little sledge or a chat to the batters, even if you're well behind the game, if you're not throwing the ball around to each other, catching it, and it's easy to sort of clock out or to get very in your own head. Yeah. Ben Duckett, to be fair, England weren't very close to having to bat again, but it is an issue with fielders, with opening batters, where it's like they've got to now start thinking about their batting as well as fielding at the same time, and maybe minds start to drift. So it was disappointing for Duckett to drop a couple, because they really did look like dollies. I think obviously the pink ball under lights plays into it. There was one that Steve Smith took where he just looked really angry after he took it, because he was like, I didn't see it. Like, he still managed to catch it. And then you saw him, next time he fielded, he had those stupid little the black things under his eyes. He'd been batting with them, but I think he decided, no, I'm going to field in these as well, because I'm just not picking this up.
But therein lies the difference. He made a catch, got angry that he nearly didn't, and then made a change.
Yeah.
That's elite mentality.
Yeah, it's a mindset. And, Steve Smith undoubtedly has one of the best mindsets in cricket. He's constantly wants to tinker, constantly wants to do whatever he can to get on top, as we saw in the Sandpapergate scandal.
Yeah.
But you, Johnny, you're you don't like an out-and-out cheat, but you like someone who will do anything to win. And I think Steve Smith is definitely that kind of person.
Yeah, I think so. I think Sandpapergate would obviously wrangle with my opinion, but my favourite sort of sporting heroes, a la Max Verstappen, are people that are boundary pushers, take the rules into their own interpretation, and just do anything to win. Stone cold killers where winning is all that matters. And it does, and that's why I like Stuart Broad. That's why he's my favourite cricketer of all time. And I just feel like we had the discussion as well where, the walk, where I never walk. That's the sort of, I never walk is what I want from a sportsman. Yeah. In just in a nutshell.
And as much as, Australia take the piss out of him for that one because it happened against Australia, they are the kings of that, saying, well, England are very much more like, well, yeah, there are rules to cricket and that is in the laws. And yeah, we wrote the laws. It's not how you're supposed to play it. Yeah. It's not the done thing. Whereas Australia...
Who cares about the done thing?
Australia like, no, we'll stump Johnny Bairstow if he's wandering out of his crease.
As they should.
Will, in an ODI, they appealed for Ben Stokes to be outstripping the field because Mitch Starc threw the ball back at him. Stokes instinctively stuck a hand out to block it and they gave him out. And, it's fair enough. And, Mitch Starc threatened to man-cad or run out of the non-striker's end earlier in the series, which is where if a batter leaves their crease early.
Just, stump him.
But England would never do that.
You should do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels like it's as much as, people can say Australia are, they call them cheats, but they're not cheats. They're playing within the rules. They have cheated in the past, but I think it's more indicative of a mindset where they care about every little percentile and they will do every little thing needed to help them win. And that's why they always win.
Absolutely. Well, it's the, to make the Formula One comparison, it's the Stirling Moss mentality. Do you know much about Stirling Moss?
No, enlighten me.
So Stirling Moss was for a long, long time, and probably still is, regarded as one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. He has the most race wins without winning a world title. And I think it's in the high teens, possibly into the 20s. I'm going to Google this. I should know this. But basically, he never won a world title, and he ended up in about 5 championship deciders. And the one that got away, 16 victories. So for context, Lando Norris has 11. And Lando Norris has just won the world title. And he quite famously... the stewards made a decision against his title rival in the penultimate race, which he disagreed with. He finished the race because of the penalty the stewards gave. He won the race, which would have allowed him to go into the final race still with a chance to win the title, and in hindsight would have won the title, and argued for his opponent, saying you need to strip him of that penalty because it's not fair. Because the steward said, well, okay then, yeah, we'll do that. And he lost the title by a couple of points. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing, I just don't understand that.
I don't think F1 podcast coming in the new year, by the way. We'll be covering the next season, and we'll do a bit of a role reversal with me quizzing Johnny, because as you can hear, he's very he's very knowledgeable. But I even think the Lando Norris, he got away with it in the end because he had the fastest car. But I think his principles and his team's principles very almost cost him a title that he should have won, probably 3 races ago. Yeah. And then Max Verstappen, the do anything to win guy, almost won.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think applying that to cricket, I just think I think we're making a bit of we're glazing Steve Smith slightly.
I'm not keen to do that.
Yeah, but you have to respect his mentality.
He's a fucking odd bloke, but he is a good cricketer.
Absolutely. So I suppose we should start thinking about wrapping this up and. Looking ahead to this next test. Well, have we got the dates up, Charlie? Do you know when it is?
I believe it's the 16th. 16th of December, the date of our graduation.
Oh, yes,
so
absolutely.
Maybe if we're still out or up in the morning, we can start following it.
I think we will be, and I think we should be. I think what we should do is have our graduation, have our drinks, and let that extend for as long as possible so that we are quite naturally in the position to flick the TV on. When is it? When's the...
Midnight. They start to get a little bit more socially acceptable from this point onwards.
That's good.
Or maybe, 11:30. I don't want to annoy our girlfriend too much by watching cricket on a night out, but we'll at least be following it, and then hopefully it means we'll be able to do another sort of watch along together with this test at some point.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to put some reels out.
A friend of mine, Tom, suggested we do like a boozy watch along, and I think with approaching Christmas and with the hopes of actually getting anything out of this from a cricketing perspective sort of dwindling,
we need to do something else.
Maybe we need to just start
drinking
and having a nice time.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get pissed, watch England lose more cricket and enjoy it in a different way.
Yeah, sounds great.
Let's leave it there. Charlie, as ever, beautiful to spend time with you, and beautiful to speak to you. This camera might have gone off now because of our storage issues, but for those listening, thank you very much for tuning in, and fingers crossed we can get one on the board.
See you in a week or so.
Yes, bye now.
Short of that one.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Well, I think it's because we didn't want to talk about them. That. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it was nice. I think it was a bit more of like it was less like, I think because the last test was so short, you could kind of actually do a proper overview of the test.
Yeah.
Where this one was a bit more like
condensed.
The philosophy of cricket,
yeah.
Which is always an interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how we just see where it ends. We don't plan it too much, do we?
No.
We just see where it takes us.
I think that's the benefit of doing it with a pal, because it's like we can just chat for an hour.
Yeah.
If needs be.
About anything.
Oh, it's still going.